Hey folks, back again with another vlog. This is a new series, The 7 Deadly Sins, Episode 1, The 7 Deadly Sins. This is a commission for Benny Blue. Thank you for your support, Benny. So far at least, the show seems to be a pretty typical shonen anime show. I think I'll start with what I didn't really like and the stuff that seems more promising going forward. So, and if you've seen the show and you know me, you already know what my first and biggest complaint is going to be. I immediately intensely dislike Meliadus? Is that his name? Meliadus for groping Elizabeth. Because that's gross. It's gross, it's completely uncalled for, and frankly, it's not funny. I would honestly have preferred the standard issue shonen joke where, dude gropes girl and she's smashed, and despite being like a, demure princess type, she smashes him into the dirt. They didn't go with that. Honestly, better than that would have been to not pointlessly grope her in the first place. But whatevs. They made the choice, and now Meliadus is in a deep pit from which it will be very difficult to extract himself, as far as my opinion of him is concerned. Elizabeth is also a very flat character. She is pure standard issue damsel in distress, princess who doesn't understand the outside world. It's pretty cool that, she took on the Rest Knight armor and persona, but that was basically just there to be the girl in the box scene. Where the shonen hero opens up the box and there's a love interest inside. Gurren Lagann did it. That show, Outlaw Star. Sorry, I was blanking on the title. Outlaw Star did it. I honestly don't know if it was that coming before Outlaw Star, but Outlaw Star certainly made it de rigueur. And yeah, it's another example of the series just kind of doing what every shonen anime ever has done before it. The things I do like that it's doing, though. The character with the most promise is clearly Hawk. Hawk is great. Cute, snarky, strong, adorable pig. What's not to love? Oh yeah, and apparently its mother is gigantic and wears their inn as a hat. Okay. That's something, at least. That is a cool concept. It's visually appealing. It's definitely got promise. The biggest thing that has promise is the choice to depict knights quite negatively. When we think of knights, we tend to think of things like chivalry. We don't tend to think of another word that comes from the same root as chivalry. Both come from chevalier, the French word for knight. The other one is cavalier. What does it mean to treat someone cavalierly? It means dismissively, without regard for their feelings, uncaring. And honestly, that's generally closer to how knights really were. They were assholes, as people in power usually are. Especially people with unchecked power. And that's basically what the Holy Knights are. They are in the process of setting up a military coup. They are both the military and the police in what is effectively a medieval police state that they are cementing their control over by taking out the royal family. I like this storyline. I like this as kind of the premise for the show, that this is what they're going to be fighting against, and that the people who are labeled as evil and sinful are actually going to save the kingdom from, the quote-unquote noble, but really asshole, knights. I will be interested to see if the 7 deadly sins actually are, basically bad people who have to be kind of corralled into doing good, or if they're, good people who don't follow rules very well, which are the best kind of good people. The surprise for me was, so I knew immediately that that kid had to be one of them. The fact that he had the sword, the fact that he was immediately being focused on as the main character, I immediately was like, okay, he's either a sin or the child of a sin. Probably a sin, and just for whatever reason looks like a kid. There's also, and then when they showed the pictures of all of them, I was like, okay, he has to be the main one. They've just got the visual wrong. Or something. Maybe these are the equivalent of those, the medieval equivalent of those forensic artist sketches where they try to, somebody who disappeared 10 years ago and they try to imagine what they would look like today and draw that. Or extrapolate rather than imagine. Maybe this is the medieval equivalent. They didn't do a good job because they expected him to age normally and for some reason he didn't. That would, though, imply that he was a small kid 10 years ago, although that's actually what they said, isn't it? That one person was like, how have you not changed since 10 years ago? Because, of course, as we got revealed, he is actually the leader of the Meletus. However, I had him pegged as a different sin entirely. At first, when it was him running a tavern and serving people food, and he had a friend who was a pig, I was like, okay, he's going to be gluttony. Then, when he grew up to Elizabeth, I was like, okay, he's going to be lust. As it turns out, now he's wrath. Okay. For a shonen show, making the main character wrath is probably the way to go. He's basically got to be either wrath or sloth to be the main character of a shonen show, because those are usually, if you, out of the 7 deadly sins, that's the one, those are the 2 that tend to be exhibited by shonen main characters. One or both. Either they're kind of lazy or they're very quick to anger. Or lazy and quick to anger. I like, too, that, although he's labeled with wrath, the sin of wrath, he's not, evilly wrathful. He's got some violence in him. He's got a temper, but he's not, flying off the handle and murdering people at the drop of a hat. Like I said, the more obvious sin for him was lust. What I like about that is that, it's playing with this idea of, what is a sin? Because, sort of like Full Metal Alchemist, the good version, not the older anime, sort of like it did, sins aren't inherently bad things. They're necessary parts of being human. What gets labeled as sin is, feelings and tendencies that many or most human beings experience at some point in their lives. And to label that as being something that somehow permanently stains them with evil, because that's the real problem with sin, is this idea that, you did a bad thing and therefore have accumulated this evil substance that you will now carry around for the rest of your life that's, going to just drag you down into darkness. That's bullshit. That's not how good and evil works. Anybody can do anything they choose to at any moment, assuming they're physically capable of it. You can do nothing but evil for your entire life and then suddenly start doing good. Or vice versa. It's up to you. Because it's actions that are good or bad, not some kind of essential nature of the person. People are just people. They do good things, they do bad things. Basically, depending on what they want to do. Obviously, you should try to do more good things than less bad things. But that's because good things are good and bad things are bad, not because you become good or bad based on which ones you do. So, yeah, I hate the concept of sin. I think it's embedded really deeply in our culture, and it does all kinds of really damaging things to us culturally, socially, psychologically, and we should jettison it. Which I think this shows basically, because although Japan has some similarity in that traditional Japanese ethics is also shame-based, it's also based on the idea that, you're stained by doing wrong things and need to be purified. It's not quite the same as sin, and Christianity has never really taken strong root in Japan. It's a very small percentage of the population, so their culture is a lot less influenced by it, so they're able to play with it in ways that might not be immediately obvious to people coming from a culture that is drenched in Christianity. They can play around with some of those ideas more freely just because they don't have taboo associated with them, in our culture, if you start questioning the idea of sin, there's hundreds of years of history of people basing their entire ethics on the concept, and so it sounds like you're endorsing evil. That's not necessarily the case when you're doing it in a country that doesn't have a Christian background, like Japan. So there's a little more freedom to do that in a mass media kind of thing. And I like that they're, at least initially, playing with it a little. They've been unfairly labeled as bad when they just are what they are. Like I said, Meliodas doesn't do anything wrong based in wrath. He protects Elizabeth from an attacker who may have the law on his side because the Holy Knights are the law, but he's still morally wrong to be attacking them. His reason is utterly ridiculous, that he wants to maintain his death count. He declared them dead in the first attack, therefore they must die. Very kind of a bureaucratic approach. And he responds to that, but he never really, flips out or anything. Like I said, the main thing he does that's wrong that you could call rooted in the 7 deadly sins is groping Elizabeth. And that's lust, not wrath. So, yeah. His wrathful side is actually, at least in this episode, purely good. Saves the princess, fights off the bad guy. Other than that, I'm assuming much of the season will be taken up with gathering the band back together, the other 7 deadly sins. I'm assuming that at some point, either his sword will be reforged, or he'll find the missing blade, assuming that it is missing and not just destroyed, or in some other way he will end up with a complete sword. I'm hoping that Elizabeth becomes something other than a damsel in distress. That she develops some kind of skills or abilities or powers that are useful for the team. I'm hoping it's not healing, because, dear God, am I sick of the love interest white mage thing, which is so common in video games and shows up in shonen as well. I'm hoping it's either an offensive power, or like she doesn't have any like special powers, but she turns out to be really good at strategy or tactics, or ends up like the leader of the team. That would be a nice change from normal shonen genericness. Any other comments? It mostly looked pretty good. There was one bit where the one soldier, Alion, I think his name was, is falling off the cliff that looked really stiff and bad. Like, it was really obvious that they weren't actually animating him in any kind of motions. They were just rotating him as he fell. But otherwise, it looked pretty good, especially the bit where they were, like, rushing through the trees. There was a little bit of a, it was kind of obvious that the trees were 3D CGI and the characters were, like, 2D kind of a thing. But it still looked pretty good. The trees looked good. The character designs, they pop, they've got good color, they're distinctive. Elizabeth is a little generic, but maybe they'll change that up a little. Yeah. Overall, it's not the most promising start of any show I've ever watched for this, but it certainly could be a lot worse, and I'm open to seeing what it becomes and where it goes. All right. Thank you again, Benny, for backing my Patreon and commissioning this vlog. Hope you all enjoyed that. If you did, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. If you want some more videos right away, you can hop over to my Patreon and see them there. Got other goodies there, blog posts, ability to commission videos. Feel free to check it out. Bye.